Kevin.
Hi friends, I'm Maggie.
And today we're going to talk about Jin Gui Shen.
It is formula that warm and tonifies the young. This formula is also known as...
It can be called Ba Wei Di Huang Wan, which uses ro gui, a type of cinnamon.
And the first name that we mentioned to you, Jin Gui Shen, that formula uses guizhi, which is technically
cinnamon also. We're going to talk about guizhi in just a moment.
Okay. Another name for this formula is also Shen Qi Wan.
Or Romania 8 formula.
And pills for restoring the vital energy and function of the kidney.
So we can think about lower dantian, kidney qi. Anytime we need to open that gate of vitality with kidney qi, we're going to turn to this formula, right, Maggie?
That's right. That's why it's also called kidney qi pill.
Love it. So what's inside of this formula, Maggie?
Okay. So inside of this formula, we have 2, 4, 6, 8 different herbs.
Wow, look at those herbs. They're absolutely beautiful. These herbs, Maggie, came from Camwo in New York. They're fresh, they're organic herbs. They're fantastic. And we're going to put them in a blender later on and make a wonderful decoction and glycerate from them.
That's right. So the first herbs mentioned in the formula is called Shen Di Huang. It is the deputy in the formula. And it looks like an Oreo cookie.
Oh my goodness, does it taste like an Oreo cookie?
I don't think so. I am not going to try it raw like this.
Okay.
This type of herb nourishes yin and blood and tonifies the kidney.
Oh, excellent. So the second type of herb that we're going to look at is Xuanzhu. And Xuanzhu is so interesting. This is like a very similar to goji. It's a dogwood berry from China, the Chinese dogwood tree. And I tasted a little bit of it earlier, and it's like a pucker your lips type herb. So very interesting herb. But this herb nourishes the kidney yin and yang, and it astringes. That's where the comes into play and stops any kind of excess perspiration that we might have. So tonifying the liver, benefiting the spleen. This is a very important herb in the formula. Maggie?
In combination, this herb with the shan yao, which is the next herb in the formula, it has a little different function. It tonifies the liver and benefits the spleen. And this shan yao, it's so pretty. It's a beautiful...
It is beautiful, Maggie.
Yeah, it is sweet and bland. And those flavors tend to strengthen the spleen and stabilize kidneys and nourish the jing. That, if you break it, it's so fragile.
It almost looks like
Delicate.
chalk. I bet it tastes like ice cream. Have you tasted it?
I tasted it, and trust me, it is no ice cream.
But it has good medicinal properties. So,
Right.
this one was shan yao. It's a Dioscorea root. Okay, very cool. The
And
next herb would be...
it's a bao futsa. We have the different preparation of futsa here. This type of preparation is a gel futsa, which means it's wine steamed, and the other one, the bao, is baked.
I heard that the futsa has some level of toxicity. Is that true, Maggie?
That is very true.
So how do we deal with futsa, a toxic herb being in our formula?
When you are trying to buy this type of herb, first of all, you have to check your suppliers. You will never buy it off the black market. Futsa can be really toxic. And those signs and symptoms of toxicity we are not going to talk about today, but you can easily look it up.
So, futsa has a very strongly warming effect. It has an incredible downward moving effect. And it's tonifying the Mingmen, which we all know where the Mingmen is, right here in our lower back. Very important gate point. And besides tonifying the pigment, it dispels cold, eliminates dampness, and tonifies kidney yang, does so much.
What is interesting also about this herb that we didn't mention, this herb is a chief herb in this formula, which means this herb drives the bus. It's so important because of the strongly acrid and warming properties.
Hey Maggie, being the chief herb, does that mean that there's more of this herb in the formula than any other herbs?
Normally, great question, Kevin. Normally, that's what it would be. However, because of toxicity of futsa, the amount comparing to other herbs is very minimal. It's about 3 grams if I'm not mistaken. Yes, I just checked and it's only 3 grams comparing to Sheng Di Huang that was 24 grams.
Oh, so it must be very concentrated and have a lot of power.
I think it's not so much concentrated, but yes, it has a very big power.
A lot of power, strong herb. So let's talk about the cinnamon component, Maggie. We have Gui Shen, which, I love the cinnamon in Chinese formulas. Gui Shen, so beautiful. These are the twigs of the Cinnamomum cassia plant, Maggie. They're chopped up twigs, and they're not what we buy in a culinary container from the grocery store, but Gui Shen is from the top of the Cinnamomum cassia plant.
Yeah, but this part, it's the same plant. However,
Really?
it's rogui, and rogui,
Ooh, I can smell rogui.
it's a little bit more potent. It's closer to the root of the tree. It's the bark of the tree. You can see it's the structure is a little bit different. It's larger, more potent, and more fragrant as
Being
well.
from the bottom of the plant, I wonder if that means it has more effect in our lower dantian and the lower jiao, Maggie.
It definitely does. It has the strong, acrid, sweet, and warming property. And that is also a chief herb in this formula. And again, out of the ordinary, it is only 3 grams that we put in this formula. Although those 2 herbs are so powerful, they are only in a small amounts in this formula, and everything else balances it out. Let's move to the next herb.
This is one of my favorite herbs. Hard to pronounce, but I say zexia. And zexia is water plantain. Looks like a cracker, stale cracker. It tastes like a stale cracker too. But the beauty of zexia is zexia helps futsa and some of the other very important herbs move throughout our body. And we can see that ability in the way that this herb grows. It has a very fibrous, open root system, and so it moves water because this plant grows in water at the edges of lakes and ponds and rivers. And so this zexia moves water in the plant in nature, and so it moves the formula that's a component of throughout our body. It helps move those other important chemicals in our body, right, Maggie?
That's right, and then even more interesting, if you connect the two, zexia, it's the herb that grows in the pond, in the water. How cool is that? And it moves water in our body. If you imagine a little sponge with those little connectors, that's how this root would look like under the microscope. It has the spongy-like quality that the water can easily pass through, and it promotes urination and prevents kidney fire as a result of the tonification.
Isn't that so amazing? This next herb, Maggie, is a mushroom actually, or a fungus, and we call it Fuling.
Yeah, and the fuling, when dried, looks just like that. In nature, I don't know if you know mushrooms in your forest, but it almost looks like the fancy hat turned the other way. When your umbrella blows up in the wind and it turns the other way.
Right.
And it has this nice white color in nature.
So what does Fuling do in this formula, Maggie?
It strengthens the spleen and drains dampness.
Which is a very important part of our formula,
But-
draining dampness, right?
Correct, but with combination with Gui Shen, which again is
Cinnamon cassia.
Great! It warms and transforms the fluid, unblocks the yang, and promotes urination.
Boy, I need that. If I ever drink too much water, I can get some fooling and clear myself out.
And zixia!
And zixia too. Zixia, awesome. So our last herb in this formula is mudan pi. And mudan pi is really interesting because it clears heat and deficiency fire. It cools and harmonizes the blood and invigorates and dispels any kind of blood stasis that we might have stuck in our bodies. So another very important herb. And I just love Chinese herbs. They're so interesting and so powerful too.
Right. And this will come to the conclusion of introducing the herbs. However, we wanted to talk a little bit more about why would you use this formula.
Why would you use this formula, Maggie?
Well, if I had a lower back pain and weakness in lower extremities, cold sensation in the lower half of my body, tenseness in the lower abdomen, and if I was really angry at Kevin, difficulty laying down, but being most comfortable about being propped on something,
then we would use this formula. Also, any kind of panting, if you get shortness of breath or cold feet like Raynaud's syndrome, dark circles under your eyes from way too much studying, urinary difficulties, then this formula can do the trick in restoring the yang. How about your tongue, Maggie? What kind of symptoms or signs of our tongue would we have?
a pale tongue and swollen but thin, white with moist coating. This is the tongue that you will want to use this formula for. How about your pulse, Kevin?
Well, for pulse, I would probably, if I had an empty or frail or submerged and maybe faint at the proximal position, the pulse, then this formula would be very appropriate.
And friends, if you know proximal position, it's kidneys. That's why.
That's it. That's so fascinating how it all just ties together, Maggie.
And guess what, friends? All kinds of kidney and spleen yang deficiency patterns can be treated with this formula.
Right. This formula is very famous for kidney yang. So anytime we need to tonify kidney yang, we are going to turn to this formula. What about contraindications, Maggie? Are there any?
Yeah, there are definitely some contraindications. If your patients have extreme cases of yin deficiency with a dry mouth, dry throat, red tongue with little coating, you would not really want to use this formula. But this formula is a master of balance. In its form, you could see those herbs had tonifying herbs and draining herbs and slightly cooling and warming herbs.
Right.
It's an amazing masterpiece formula which nourishes that yin and yang.
I actually think this is one of the most famous formulas that there are in traditional Chinese medicine.
That's right, and it was one of the first ones developed and used widely for many, many years.
And then finally, I'm always very interested in the toxicity of any formula, and this formula does include Futsura aconite, which is detoxified by the Patscher method of dry heat baking and or wine steaming. So even though it is detoxified, this Futsura should be boiled for an hour longer when making a decoction than any other of the other herbs.
So we would recommend to boil it first for an hour and then add the rest of the herbs and cook it longer at the normal amount.
We're so glad that you joined us today to learn about our formula, and we hope you follow along with us. And if you are looking for any kind of great Chinese herbs, always consider Estuary Herbs in St. Petersburg, Florida.
That's all for today. Thank you, friends.